On the early evening of May 7, 2008, in the small town of Kosevo in southeast Europe, a 65-year-old woman named Zvezda Temelkovska was doing housework in the kitchen of her apartment. Kosevo is a quiet place in North Macedonia at the foot of Mount Bistra. Although it was a beautiful town, it was remote and not much of note happened there. Kosevo had about 23,000 inhabitants. Zvezda made her living cleaning houses, but she had the day off, so she was cooking dinner, washing clothes, and cleaning her own house while waiting for the return of her adult son named Zoran. Amid the hustle and bustle of housework, Zvezda heard the phone ring in the hallway. She picked up the receiver and heard the voice of her friend on the other end of the line, but the voice sounded strangely tense and confused. The friend asked Zvezda if she had heard the latest news. After she denied this, the woman told her that the radio had just reported a terrible traffic accident in their town. Unfortunately, Zvezda's son Zoran, whom she was expecting at home, was apparently involved in the accident. When Zvezda heard this, she let out a strangled cry, hung up the phone, and ran out the door. A neighbor she met asked what had happened. The agitated woman screamed that her son had had an accident and she was on her way to the hospital. Then she turned the corner and disappeared. Zvezda didn't have her own car, so she was ready to go to the clinic to make sure her son was okay. A little later, the same neighbor who had seen Zvezda turn the corner heard a knock at the door. She opened the door and was completely shocked to see who was standing in front of it. It was Zvezda's son Zoran, in perfect health. The man did not seem in the least injured. He looked clearly embarrassed and, before the neighbor could ask questions, he asked if the woman had seen his mother. They had arranged to have dinner together, but for some reason she was not home. Zvezda had not warned her son that she would leave, and that was not her way. The neighbor didn't understand anything either. She told Zoran that she had seen his mother rush to the hospital and casually mentioned that her son had had a car accident. Zoran was as confused as the neighbor, so he took out his phone and called the clinic to see if his mother was there. The receptionist's message surprised him very much. First, Zvezda had not shown up there. Second, they had also heard the report of a serious car accident in the city, but none of the injured had been brought to them. The next morning, when Zvezda still hadn't shown up and Zoran had no idea what had happened to his mother, he went to the police and filed a missing persons report. 9 days later, on May 16, Zvezda Temelkovska was still missing, and her son Zoran had no idea where to look for her. However, her body had already been discovered. This information had not yet been made public because the body was badly mutilated, wrapped in plastic wrap, tied with wire, and dumped in an illegal landfill near the city's soccer stadium. Additionally, the woman had been abused with various objects. However, the police's initial investigations revealed that the deceased was a poor elderly cleaning woman who had no enemies. The investigators could not understand why she became the victim of such a brutally obvious and intimate crime. Later that day, a 56-year-old reporter named Vlado Taneski, who lived near the house of the missing woman, received the news. He received a call from one of his informants at the police station who told him that Zvezda had just been found, and unfortunately, the woman was dead. The informant told Vlado that during a search of the body, her valuables were found with the victim. So the version of a botched robbery was immediately ruled out. Taneski thanked his informant for the information and leaned back in his chair to gather his thoughts. Vlado, unlike his informant, was not so shocked but suspected something was wrong. He felt that something didn't add up. Perhaps Zvezda really did seem like a poor elderly cleaning lady with no enemies, but in reality, this woman might have been leading some kind of secret life, which is why she was attacked. Or she had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see, and that was why she was killed. The reporter felt that he had to get involved in this investigation. Vlado Tedeschi had a reputation in the city as a very professional, aggressive, and fearless reporter. He had no problem diving headfirst into tangled dark stories that might involve corruption or abuse of power, and always got to the bottom of things. Again and again, he published articles in which he criticized the government, the police, and anyone in power. Because Vlado had behaved this way throughout his 30-year career, he received many death threats. Although the story about the death of Zivana Timilkowska could once again embarrass him before the authorities, he felt it was his duty to investigate the case and get to the bottom of it. Determined, Vlado grabbed his notebook and pen and went out the door. He made his way to the house of the dead woman to speak with her son. Just a few minutes later, Vlado and Zoran were sitting in the kitchen, talking about what had happened. The man told the reporter how he had come home that evening and not found his mother. While Zoran was talking, Vlado took many notes and asked many additional questions. By the end of the conversation, the reporter had already put the facts together in his mind and realized that he had a pretty good theory about what had actually happened to Zivana. The reason for this was that Zoran's mother made her living cleaning other people's houses. Vlado needed a few days to piece together the whole story. He had to go out and interview dozens of people in the neighborhood. Finally, on May 19, just 3 days after Zivana's death, Vlado Tedeschi published a sensational headline in the newspaper: "A serial killer lurks in Kosevo too." In the article, Vlado wrote that the gruesome death of Zivana Timilkowska was probably not an isolated case. It was connected to the deaths of 2 other victims. All 3 women had a similar appearance and age and worked as cleaners. This is why, during the conversation with Zoran, when he described his mother, how she looked, and what she did, Vlado remembered the other 2 victims and put all the facts together, finding the following similarities. One of the victims was 64-year-old Mitra Simeonowska, who disappeared in November 2004 while shopping at a supermarket. Her body was discovered only in January of the following year. The elderly woman was found wrapped in a plastic bag. She was wearing only a dark sweater. Additionally, she was forced into sexual intercourse, beaten, and strangled with a telephone cable. The pathologist determined that Mitra had been dead for several months when the body was found. The other victim was 56-year-old Lubita Likowska, who was murdered in November 2007. Her body was found in an abandoned landfill in the woods. She was abused, and the perpetrator also used a telephone cable. He dismembered her body and disposed of it in black garbage bags. Vlado's story was shocking information for the residents of the small town, who learned that a serial killer was roaming their quiet streets. The article was also scandalous because the author once again criticized the police involved in these investigations. 2 young men who were already under investigation were accused of the first crime, but their involvement could not be proven. The second incident occurred when the 2 suspects were already behind bars, making their involvement doubtful. The police officers reacted skeptically to the criticism directed at them but couldn't help recognizing that Vlado had managed to uncover many new details in the 3 cases, and it indeed painted the picture of a serial killer who linked all 3 cases together. So, the police essentially began investigating a new case based on Vlado's story, connecting the deaths of the 3 cleaners. At the same time, the reporter noticed that he was being followed. Whatever he did in the city, whether he spoke with witnesses or searched for new information for his articles, there had to be a policeman somewhere watching him from a distance. Tedeschi suspected that his outburst against the police would not go unnoticed and that he would inevitably face some kind of backlash from the police. The reporter had come to terms with the fact that he would be watched and that they might try to intimidate him, but that didn't bother him because he was doing his job, and his story was true and based on facts. In early June, about 2 weeks after Zhavana Timilkauska's body was found, the police had narrowed down the circle of suspects to just 3 people. Originally, there had been hundreds. They believed they were close to finding and arresting the potential perpetrator. The surveillance of the journalist continued, but the authorities never publicly discussed the case of the serial killer in the small town of Kosevo and said nothing about it. It got to the point that all 3 cases were published in the Criminal Chronicle of various publications in Macedonia. Vlado's notes served their purpose. The locals began to suspect that Vlado was right in his judgment about the poor work of the investigators. On June 20, 2008, the editor of the newspaper where Vlado worked received a call from a police officer with the confidential information that the authorities were about to make an arrest in the case of the triple murder of elderly cleaning women. Immediately after the call, the editor called Vlado to inform him of this news. However, Vlado did not answer the phone, which was very strange. Even more surprising for the editor was that the officer had called him and not the man who had actually pushed the authorities to further investigate. Apparently, the criticism of them had struck a nerve, and the police had deliberately ignored the scandalous reporter. While contemplating this, the editor kept calling Vlado, but he still did not answer the phone. The newspaper staff assumed that Vlado had somehow learned about the impending arrest and was already on site to follow the police action in real time. At that moment, the police surrounded a very modest 2-story house on a quiet street in Kosevo, whose facade was heavily overgrown with bushes and tall trees. All the windows of the building were covered with heavy curtains, and there was silence inside. With all escape routes blocked, the task force climbed onto the stone porch, knocked cautiously on the door, and announced that they were the police. Everyone in the house was ordered to come out with their hands up. For a moment, there was complete silence and tension. Then, the officers on the porch heard slow footsteps inside the house. They had their weapons ready as the door slowly opened. The man who appeared in the doorway looked completely harmless and a little confused, obviously not sure what was going on. The officers immediately arrested him, put him in a patrol car, and took him to the station. During the search of the suspect's home, the investigators found an impressive collection of erotic films with explicit violent scenes. This was another warning signal, considering the crime he was suspected of. Shortly after, the phone in the newspaper's editorial office rang again. It was the same police officer who had warned of the impending arrest, only this time he said that the arrest had indeed taken place and that they had finally caught the perpetrator of a series of serious crimes in the town. Then he gave the editor the name of the arrested person. When the newspaper staff heard the name, they dropped the receiver in shock. The serial killer turned out to be Vlado Tedeschi, a well-known reporter. Outwardly, the reporter seemed very reserved and calm, but inside, he was full of anger towards all the people around him, especially his mother. When he was arrested, the man was calm, perhaps still hoping that it was a mistake. At the police station, he mostly remained silent, then denied knowing the 3 murdered women at all. He behaved restrainedly, without aggression or remorse. The investigators even suspected that Tedeschi had intended to get caught at some point. The reporter realized that such candid descriptions and details of the crimes would sooner or later cast doubt on him. How could he know what even the investigators didn't know? For many people who knew Vlado closely, he seemed reserved and introverted, but such characteristics did not make him a criminal. Therefore, everyone was shocked when it turned out that the journalist was precisely the serial killer he had so vividly reported on in his exposé articles. Vlado Tedeschi was born in 1952 in the town of Kosevo. He had an older brother and a younger sister. The family was never wealthy and lived quite modestly. if not poorly. The parents raised their children strictly and made them put all their energy into education. The boy studied well, was quiet and inconspicuous, but deep inside, he dreamed of fame and recognition. After graduating from school, young Vlado went to Croatia to become a journalist. There, he felt free because the relationship with his father and mother was not particularly good. When he turned 21, he met a girl named Vesna. They soon married, and Vlado became the father of 2 children. The couple had similar interests, and the children brought them even closer together. His wife spoke of him as a wonderful father and husband. The talent of the young journalist began to gradually unfold, and by the mid-1980s, he was working as a reporter for the newspapers Nova Macedonia and Jutrinski Vesnik. Colleagues considered him a professional and spoke kindly of him. For the authorities, however, the man was a thorn in the side. Vlado had great success in his career and became popular throughout the country. In Macedonia, he even received several awards for his professionalism. The crime stories in his articles took on an even darker tone, which drew attention and interest from readers to his column. He was willing to do anything to become famous and gain respect in the industry. To this end, Vlado chose topics that would leave no reader indifferent. The problem was that sensations did not occur every day. He resorted to forbidden methods and created sensations on his own. In 2003, Tedeschi was forced to give up his position in the newsroom. A tragedy occurred in his family, after which he withdrew and became depressed. He began to miss work and wander around the city, which led to financial difficulties and a deterioration in his relationship with his wife, and Vlado was fired. His wife took his place. Due to a violation of work discipline, the man was offered to become a freelance correspondent. Shortly thereafter, Vesna Tedeschi was promoted, took her children, and moved to Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia. Vlado was left alone with his tragedy and anxious thoughts. The fact is that Vlado's father, Slobodan Tedeschi, was a World War II veteran, while his mother, Anton, worked as a simple cleaning lady. There is no exact information about the motive, but in 2002, his parents committed suicide. His father hanged himself, and his mother poisoned herself with pills. Due to these events, Vlado's life turned upside down overnight. The man blamed his own mother for all his problems, portraying her as a cruel tyrant with a terrible character. According to available data, the woman treated her son very poorly in childhood, beating and humiliating him. It is possible that the relationship with his mother had a strong influence on the perpetrator's psyche. Since it was impossible to take revenge on his deceased mother, Vlado became obsessed with the idea of deciding the fate of people who resembled her. He randomly chose women who worked as cleaning ladies, all around the same age and appearance, plump, smiling brunettes with a kind-hearted look. 3 of Vlado's victims were Mitra Simeonowska in 2004, Lubita Likowska in 2007, and Zavana Timilkowska in 2008. All these women knew Vlado's mother personally. Therefore, he used this connection to gain the trust of each of them. Initially, he studied their work schedules, followed them, and chose the right moment to attack. When the right moment came, Vlado lured the victims onto the street, followed them into a dark alley, and took them to an unknown location with the help of his personal acquaintance. After the murder, Vlado usually visited the homes of the victims' relatives under the pretext of wanting to find out details about the disappearance of the women. He expressed his condolences and asked them to tell him how they were doing when they were still alive. He later used the information he obtained in his articles. All 3 women were found half-naked in black plastic bags, obviously abused, beaten, and strangled with a telephone cable. DNA was found on the body of one of the victims, but no matches were found in the database. In his revealing article, Valado lied about a number of pieces of evidence to confuse the police. For example, he mentioned a witness who allegedly saw Zavana get into a car with two men before her disappearance. Valado was also the one who reported on the radio that Soren Timolkowski was involved in a terrible car accident. At that moment, the woman, in her desperation, ran out of the apartment. At that moment, she could believe anything she was told, and that was exactly what Valado wanted. He personally called the news editor and told him about the car accident. Since Valado had previously worked at the radio station, they believed him and did not check the facts but simply aired the news. In reality, it was all a deliberate trap by Valado to lure Zavana out of the apartment. Finally, he was caught referring to certain details in his articles that the police had withheld from the public. This happened when the police had not yet even received the results of the autopsy. Such details could only be known to the eyewitness, the victim, or the perpetrator. For example, Valado mentioned that Zavana was strangled with a telephone cable and the body bag was tied with the same cable. These details only came to light after the forensic examination. So, the article was ahead of the investigation. Valado described the atrocity so vividly that it was frightening to imagine him being there. A telephone cable was also used with the other two victims, which was later left at the crime scene, but this information was also not available to the public. After Valado's story appeared in the newspaper, law enforcement agencies had serious suspicions against the reporter. How else could he have known such details about the incident, when Valado thought the police were only following him to intimidate him? They suspected him of being involved in the crimes. Finally, they managed to obtain a DNA sample from the scandal-ridden journalist and compare it with that of one of the victims. Their worst fears were confirmed. The famous crime reporter turned out to be a serial killer who murdered elderly women. Immediately after his arrest, Valado was charged with 3 crimes. Moreover, investigators suspected there were more crimes. The wanted list also included 78-year-old Gorica Polewski, who had been missing since 2003. The police suspected she might also have been a victim of Valado. Unfortunately, the elderly woman's body was never found, so no evidence of involvement in the crime was found. To the disappointment of everyone, this man never received the punishment he deserved. On June 23, just 3 days after his arrest, Valado died in his prison cell at the Titovo Detention Center, taking the secret of his actions to the grave. The exact motive for his crimes remained a mystery to the investigators. It is presumed that the man drowned himself in a small plastic bucket, as water was found in his lungs. He was 56 years old at the time of his death. 3 other people were in the room with him. They reported that they did not notice how it happened as they were sleeping at the time and heard nothing. The investigation into Valado's death went cold. The way Valado ended his life left the public horrified. Neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances all agreed that they could not imagine Valado as a madman. In their opinion, the man who advocated for the interests of the residents of Kosevo could not have taken the lives of elderly women. He might have been a reserved and uncommunicative person, but he had a good upbringing. Officially, Valado Taneski's death was recognized as suicide, and the case was closed. The media continued to discuss the crimes committed by this man for a long time. He even received several nicknames: the Macedonian Jack the Ripper, the Grandmother Hunter, and the Crazy Journalist. Thus, Macedonia had a second serial killer. Thank you for watching and take care of yourselves.
Hello everyone and welcome. Today we are diving into another truly horrific case. If you would like to support my channel, please subscribe and stay active. That really helps me a lot. I would be truly grateful to you for that. Let's get started. There are few people in the world who have never experienced rejection. Some people take it calmly and move on, while others remember the rejection for the rest of their lives. What do you think a rejected man is willing to do? I just wanted to see you naked. That's how the man explained it. He was rejected. This year was supposed to be the most significant one for the young student. Two important events were coming up that would completely change her life. But her journey as a bridesmaid to the wedding ended tragically. Today's story happened in August 2012 in Plainfield, a city in Will and Kendall counties in Illinois, USA. Let's go back more than 12 years. Before you stands 21-year-old Alicia Bromfield. Joliet was located about 15 km from Plainfield. Alicia was one of 5 children, but despite all the difficulties, she always found a reason to enjoy life. She took all problems with ease, laughed, and inspired others with her optimism. Since she had younger brothers and sisters, she got used to solving her problems on her own and not upsetting her parents over small things. This habit cost her life. When the incident occurred, Alicia was in her final year at Joliet Catholic Academy and was studying at Western Illinois University. She only had a few months left to complete her studies in criminal justice and forensic psychology. Since childhood, she had dreamed of a career in law and was getting closer to her goal. But this was not the only important event in her life. Alicia was soon to become a mother. She was 6 months pregnant. At the same time, she was preparing to be a single mother. When she got pregnant, her boyfriend, the father of the child, did not want to take responsibility for the baby and broke up with Alicia, leaving her to deal with the situation alone. But Alicia didn't worry about it. Of course, she was afraid of being alone with the baby in her arms, but she had strong support from family and friends. She was prepared in advance to fight possible difficulties. Alicia was overjoyed when she found out the baby's gender. She was having a girl. Alicia had even already chosen a name for her little girl, Ava Lucille. She couldn't wait to hold her daughter in her arms. Alicia was morally ready for motherhood. She knew money would be tight since she only had one source of income to support herself and the baby. So during her pregnancy, Alicia bought baby clothes and other things she would need after Ava's birth. Bottles, diapers, onesies, and sleepers. She was lucky to get a job as a florist in a garden center, where she designed the flower shop's displays and arranged bouquets for customers. It was possible to combine her studies with a seasonal job. In the winter, she had time off but was paid properly as this time was considered paid vacation. Alicia had worked at the garden center for about 6 years, starting when she was a teenager. Baby Ava Lucille was expected in the early winter of 2012, just in time before the end of her university exams and her vacation from work. The expectant mother was very fortunate to gradually get used to her new status and be able to spend the first months after birth with her baby. After that, she planned to work again at the garden center, and when Ava Lucille was a bit older, she could pursue a career as a lawyer. For 21-year-old Alicia Bromfield, life seemed to be going well. She was looking forward to graduating as a forensic psychologist and to the birth of her little girl. And Alicia was indeed happy. But she would never experience the major milestones of her life because in the summer of 2012, she became the victim of a truly cruel crime. On the morning of Sunday, August 19, 2012, an employee dialed emergency services, and when the operator answered, he handed the phone to a customer. At that moment, a man in soaking wet clothes reported the crime. He admitted to taking the life of a young pregnant woman in a hotel room the night before. When the dispatcher asked if it had been an accident, the man calmly replied that it had been intentional and then added that he was actually a good person, apart from what he had done last night. Alicia's family would be stunned to learn she was no longer alive. After all, she was the young woman whose murder was reported in a phone call by a stranger. So who was this mysterious man standing at the gas station in soaking wet clothes? And how did the pregnant woman end up in a hotel room at a resort in Door County, Wisconsin? Brian Cooper was 36 years old, 15 years older than Alicia and her direct supervisor. Bromfield and Cooper had worked together for about 5 years. Initially, Cooper seemed like a very nice and friendly person to Alicia. He directly supervised her work and ensured her schedule and tasks were completed. They got along very well and soon became good friends. Sometimes Alicia even walked his dog so she had a key to Brian's house. When Alicia got the job at the garden center, she was still a teenager and used every opportunity to earn money. When the boss asked her to look after his four-legged friend and walk him, the student saw it as an excuse to please her boss while also getting a small financial reward. She had no idea what was behind this innocent request. However, it soon became clear that Brian liked Alicia as more than just a friend. He was clearly interested in her despite the considerable age difference. The man often made inappropriate remarks about her and sometimes introduced Alicia to new employees as his girlfriend, even though they never had anything together. He used his power and position to control almost every aspect of her life and constantly tried to get closer to her. Cooper repeatedly tried to lure the employee into the warehouse, allegedly for business reasons, to make out with her. He called her on weekends and texted her, getting angry and jealous when he saw other male employees in the company. He sometimes wouldn't let her go to lunch if he found out Bromfield would be eating alone. Brian made it clear in every possible way that he was physically attracted to Alicia. Despite all this, Alicia always rejected the boss's advances and tried to behave discreetly so as not to provoke the man. The fact is, this job suited her perfectly. Because of its seasonal nature, she could study in peace and still get a good salary. Besides, she got the job there when she was only 16 years old. She enjoyed working with flowers and liked interacting with customers. The only thing she didn't like was Brian's insistence on having an affair. At her young age, her boss seemed practically like an old man, and Alicia felt uncomfortable with his advances. But in her childish naivety, she had assumed that Cooper's desire would eventually burn out and he would leave her alone. Alicia was neither at the age nor in a position to properly confront her boss and set personal boundaries. She knew it depended directly on Brian whether she would continue working at the garden center. Moreover, Bromfield was not exactly combative. Her gentle and non-confrontational nature seemed to give her reason to believe the student was just putting on a brave face. In fact, she had made several attempts to explain to Brian that she was not attracted to him as a man, that it wasn't normal to exploit her official position, that she had a completely different taste in men. But Alicia did all this with her usual tenderness and kindness so as not to turn Cooper against her. That's why she never achieved anything. Since she provided no reciprocity, the boss became incredibly cruel and began openly using his position to his advantage. From annoying courtship, he moved on to insults, yelling and swearing at Alicia for the slightest reason, and allowed himself to call her terrible words like spoiled woman and loose woman, of course in a ruder version. He could berate her in front of customers so badly that she would run crying into the back room. The company's top management was well aware of the regional manager's inappropriate behavior but took no action against him. According to court documents, Alicia repeatedly filed complaints about Brian Cooper and his inappropriate behavior, but nothing was done. He was not fired or even suspended, but merely asked to take an anger management course, without anyone checking if he complied with this request. Alicia felt trapped in a job she loved with a hated boss who controlled her every move. She was good at her job, and considering she was only 21 years old and about to become a single mother, this job was especially important to her. Over time, the man did not become calmer. Sometimes he changed his tactics and became the same as before, a sympathetic and understanding friend. And sometimes he was possessed by a demon and could even throw objects at his subordinates. The worst part was that Cooper could simply send Alicia on a business trip and go with her. She tried to set boundaries, but she wasn't very good at it. Alicia didn't dare complain to her parents, believing she had to solve the problem on her own. And so she often felt alone and defenseless against a terrifying boss. Alicia wanted to keep her job. She had to find common ground with her supervisor, and she tried to proceed carefully so she wouldn't be left penniless in the future. The less she tried to upset Brian, the more he complained about her and the more extravagant his demands became. It was the fear of losing her job that put Alicia in the situation that led to the tragedy. Her pregnancy did not deter her boss. He still wanted to fire her or reduce her hours if she didn't obey him. Brian could intentionally schedule a shift on a day when Alicia had a doctor's appointment, forcing her to change her plans. She only had a few months left before going on vacation, and apparently she was ready to put up with some inconveniences and ignore her boss's antics. In August 2012, Cooper began persuading Alicia to accompany him to his sister's wedding in a neighboring state. The sister was getting married in Wisconsin, and Brian was supposed to walk her down the aisle. He assured his employee that he just needed company and nothing else. But when Bromfield refused, he threatened her with dismissal again. Afraid of losing her job, Alicia agreed, but on the condition that they would stay in separate hotel rooms. She really didn't want to go. But now that Bromfield was expecting a baby, she couldn't afford to lose her job. Alicia's first thought was for her little girl. In her heart, she hoped that this trip might soften Brian's harsh approach and he would stop harassing her for a while. Anyway, Brian and Alicia left Plainfield, Illinois early on the morning of Saturday, August 18, 2012, and set off on the 4-hour drive to Door County, Wisconsin, where Cooper's sister's wedding was taking place. Alicia's mother, Sherry, knew how her boss treated her daughter and begged her not to go to this wedding, but she said she had no choice. She promised her mother she would return the day after the wedding. However, she never made it home. On August 19, 2012, Brian Cooper entered a gas station in Door County and asked the employee to use the phone. He informed the dispatcher that he had taken the life of his pregnant employee, Alicia Bromfield. Police officers were immediately dispatched. They arrested Brian Cooper immediately and brought him to the station for questioning. At the same time, another team of police officers was sent to the hotel where Alicia and Brian were staying. It turned out that Cooper had booked one room for the two of them at a hotel in a resort in Door County, but he lied to her when he said they would have separate rooms and that all the other guests were also staying at the hotel. After arriving, Alicia sent a text to her mother saying that she and Brian had argued and would drive home immediately. She didn't like that she had been deceived once again. Alicia's mother, Sherry, was very surprised that Brian would miss the wedding since he was supposed to walk his sister down the aisle. The man himself also apparently realized he had behaved wrongly and apologized to her, citing the lack of available rooms at the resort's hotel. The young people decided to stay for the ceremony anyway because Bromfield didn't want to ruin his vacation and be disrespectful. When Sherry asked her daughter later that day how they were doing, Alicia replied that everything was fine and she and Brian had decided to stay for the celebration, spend the night, and return the next day as planned. The wedding itself went well. The ceremony took place outdoors. Brian fulfilled his duty of walking his sister down the aisle, but his mood left much to be desired. He spent the whole evening dwelling on Alicia's hurtful words that there wouldn't even be friendship between them anymore. Officers sent to a hotel at a resort in Door County entered the room and immediately discovered the body of 21-year-old Alicia Bromfield. She was wrapped in a blanket and a pillow had been carefully placed under her head. At first glance, it looked like she was sleeping, but upon closer inspection, the police officers noticed injuries, bruises, and scratches indicating she had tried to fight back. It was clear she had fought for her life and the life of her unborn daughter until the very end. Forensic experts were called to the crime scene. At the police station, Brian Cooper was questioned. The man said they had argued the day before about a hotel room and that Alicia wanted to go home. Then she decided to stay after all, so as not to ruin Brian's sister's vacation. She stated that when she got home, they would no longer be friends and that she would cease all communication outside of work. Brian was furious. He was hurt by these words. At that moment, the thought came to him to hurt Alicia in the same way, only physically. Brian told the investigators that he and Bromfield had met up and that they got along well. He continued that he had always wanted a relationship with Alicia, that she was supposed to be his mistress. But since she was pregnant by another man, he held back somewhat out of consideration, so they went to the wedding where they took one last photo together. Alicia tried to appear cheerful, but after the ceremony and the party, when they returned to their hotel room, she went to bed to get through the day as there were 2 beds in the room. Meanwhile, Brian kept drinking. He was quite drunk already, but he was aware that as soon as they were back in Illinois, Bromfield would cut off all contact with him. While Alicia slept, he just paced around the hotel room, poured himself alcohol, and went outside to smoke. The anger inside him grew and grew. The man was angry at the sleeping Alicia for rejecting him, and no matter what he did, no matter how he behaved, she always remained unattainable. Uncontrollable rage surged through his entire body. How dare she say she would cut off contact? Brian was not used to a woman rejecting him. He was the one who had power and control over her as he was her supervisor. He was the one who had always had the authority. The fact that Alicia was now standing her ground and saying she'd had enough, that she was tired of being reprimanded and humiliated, raised his wounded male pride to an unprecedented level. With every sip, Cooper lost control of himself. His behavior was incomprehensible. He was afraid of losing Alicia, but he also desperately wanted to hurt her to get revenge, so she would never dare reject him again. The man began running through possibilities in his head for the best way to do it, what he could use to take Alicia's life. At that moment, Alicia woke up as if she sensed the danger emanating from her boss. She went out onto the balcony to get some air. And when she came back, Brian suggested that tomorrow, when they were back home in Plainfield, they should meet up to watch a movie. But Alicia said firmly, no, she would keep her word and cut off all contact with this man. At that moment, a switch flipped in Brian's head. The rejection spurred him on to what he did next. The man literally jumped on Alicia, who was sitting on the bed, pinned her down, wrapped his arms around her neck, and began strangling her. Alicia had not expected such a turn of events, panicked, and began to fight back, trying to loosen Cooper's hands, but finally gave in. She begged him to stop and to think of the baby. In her final moments, Alicia was not thinking of her own life, but of saving her unborn daughter. Nevertheless, he continued his attack. During the struggle, they fell from the bed to the floor, and there Alicia managed to bite his finger. Brian became even angrier and strangled Alicia until she stopped resisting. Instead of calling an ambulance and trying to save the child, Brian stripped Alicia naked and abused the corpse in a fit of unimaginable depravity. To the investigators, he explained that he wanted to see Alicia without her clothes. After satisfying his dirty lust, the man covered her body with a blanket and placed a pillow under her head. The next step in his plan was to kill himself. Cooper did not want to face the consequences of his actions. He did not want to be arrested and put in prison. He would have to face everyone who knew him and somehow explain his transgression. The drunk Brian tried to stab himself with a knife and a corkscrew, but it hurt. Physically, he couldn't hurt himself, so he climbed into the bathroom and fell into a deep unconsciousness. Cooper woke up in the morning. He came out of the bathroom and couldn't even look at the corpse of Alicia, whom he had been chasing after for the past few years. Horrified, he left the hotel and headed to the local bay where he intended to drown himself. Brian swam further out into the water and gave himself to the waves, but his self-preservation instinct kicked in. His body fought for its life on its own, even though he actually wanted to die. So his next attempt to end his life failed. Depressed, Brian waited on shore and walked along the beach until he saw a gas station. When he went in to call the police and turn himself in, water was still dripping from his clothes. That is exactly the story the arrested man told the investigators. When asked by investigators if he had ever had similar outbursts of anger before, Brian said he had never taken anyone's life before. Bromfield was the first victim. He also admitted to abusing his ex-girlfriend and once, during an argument, tying her up so he could have a proper conversation. The ex-girlfriend was so frightened that she didn't dare go to the police and file a report against him because Cooper had never been charged with violent acts before. If she had reported him back then, who knows, maybe Alicia would still be alive. After the discovery of the body in the hotel room, Alicia's family was immediately informed of the incident. The worst part is that the unborn Ava Lucille also died in the womb. The grief of the relatives who were preparing for the imminent birth of a little girl was boundless. Brian Cooper was charged with intentional bodily harm, manslaughter, and abuse of a human corpse. A judge set Cooper's bail at $1 million while he sat in jail awaiting his trial. In addition to Cooper's detailed taped confession, the police continued to work on building a case against him. They managed to gather numerous pieces of evidence that Brian had harassed Alicia professionally and privately for several years. On his computer, they found further evidence, several hidden camera videos. Brian installed a mini camera in the bathroom of his apartment and filmed Alicia using the toilet after walking the dog. He also hid a small recording device in a trash can in the bathroom of the hotel room and filmed her naked as she came out of the shower. All this not only confirmed Brian's obsession with Alicia, but also made clear what a sick, twisted man he really was. She had no idea that her trips to the toilet had been recorded multiple times. The tape even showed the password for Brian's cell phone. It was Alicia's birth date. Despite his confession to investigators, Cooper pleaded not guilty at trial, citing insufficient sanity. He did not deny that he was the perpetrator who took the young pregnant woman's life, but found a justification for it. Cooper's lawyers argued that their client, due to alcohol poisoning, was unable to understand what he was doing. In their opinion, he was too drunk to distinguish between right and wrong, and accordingly, Brian could not be held responsible for his actions that night. That is, he could not be held responsible for the death of Alicia and the death of her unborn child. However, the prosecution found weaknesses in this theory and relied on Cooper's confession. The man could remember in great detail what he had done to Alicia that night, which is not typical of a person under the influence of alcohol. Cooper's unsuccessful attempts to leave the world using various methods also indicate that he was aware of the wrongfulness of his actions. As incredible as it may sound, but the jury could not reach a verdict because 2 of the 12 jurors believed that Cooper, in his intoxicated state, should be acquitted of responsibility for the crime. Everyone was stunned by this outcome of the trial. The decision meant that Alicia's family had to endure a second trial, but the verdict shocked Alicia's mother Sherry the most. She was angered that the jurors were women. It was they who decided that Brian Cooper should not be punished for the massacre of a young woman and her unborn child. And the reason for this was that he simply had a few too many drinks. Sherry believed that with such laws, anyone could commit a serious crime and get away with it if they had a good drink beforehand. She did not want another family to have to endure this pain, and she also did not want young people who were victims of drunk criminals to be buried. So Alicia Bromfield's mother took action. Sherry was so outraged by the outcome of the case that she led a campaign to change the laws. Together with other family members and her daughter's friends, she spoke out against this type of defense strategy, which was actually permitted in the U.S. court system. The team led by Sherry spread the word and tried to raise public awareness by writing letters to local and higher officials, creating online petitions, and holding meetings with legislators in Wisconsin. And fortunately, the hard fight for justice brought results after some time. In the spring of 2014, a year and a half after Alicia's death, Governor Scott Walker signed a law that officially removed voluntary intoxication from Wisconsin's law. Sherry successfully achieved changes to the laws in states. However, these changes did not apply to Brian, as the crime occurred before the laws were passed. Since the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict the first time, Cooper had to be retried for the massacre of Alicia Bromfield. The trial took place in May 2014. As mentioned, Brian's defenders could still cite drunkenness as a mitigating factor during sentencing. At Brian Cooper's second trial, the jurors again learned of his pathological obsession with Alicia and how he abused his power as her boss. They saw hidden camera footage and listened to Cooper's confession, where he detailed his decision to take Alicia's life, despite her pleas and concerns for her child. This time the jury found him guilty on all counts. Brian Cooper was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Most likely, this man will never walk free again. After her daughter's death, Sherry filed a lawsuit against Alicia's employers. The woman found out that the woman had repeatedly complained about mistreatment and harassment in the workplace by her direct supervisor, regional manager Brian Cooper. It turned out that Bromfield was not the first employee to complain to management about the man's inappropriate behavior. Even before Alicia was hired at the garden center, there was a young employee named Jessica. She had just graduated from high school. It was her first job. And Brian initially paid attention to her and then began to show inappropriate interest. When she rejected Cooper's advances, he began to interfere with her work. Unlike Alicia, Jessica did not tolerate the bullying and wrote a complaint against the man. When management took no action, the employee had no choice and quit. Sherry filed a lawsuit against the company, accusing it of negligence that led to her daughter's death. After all, if the company had responded to the complaints and taken measures to protect female employees from Brian's harassment, they would not have been harmed. The company argued that the crime did not occur at the branch and that it was not obligated to monitor employees around the clock. Sherry's lawsuit was initially dismissed, but this decision was later overturned on appeal. After 2 grueling trials, Alicia's mother did not want other parents to have to go through a similar experience. Sherry felt overwhelming anger and guilt for failing to protect her daughter and granddaughter. Knowing that anger is destructive, she was able to transform it. The grief-stricken mother found the strength to help others. Sherry's family not only fought for legislative changes but also founded the Purple Project. The organization set itself the task of preserving the memory of Alicia and Ava by giving people in the North love and hope. The organization was called Purple because that was Alicia's favorite color. During the court proceedings, friends and family of the victim were prohibited from wearing clothing with Alice's picture in the courtroom. So the relatives wore purple clothing as a sign of love and support. The Purple Project organization provides psychological help to parents who have lost their children and supports single mothers in need, both morally and financially. The Purple Project accepts not only financial funds but also donations of toys, diapers, and baby clothes. The most incredible part of this story is that Sherry, in her mission to help others, teamed up with Kelly Stryker. Stryker is a social worker specializing in mental health, child abuse, and domestic violence. But that's not all she has to offer. Incredibly, Kelly is Cooper's sister who originally testified in defense of her brother at the trial, and although she defended Brian, it bothered her that he refused to take responsibility for his actions. Yes, that also happens in life. Stryker was touched by Sherry's mission to keep Leisha's memory alive and became her inspiration. Kelly herself approached Sherry and offered her help with the Purple Project, to do something to undo what her brother had done. If you liked the video, please give it a like. That helps a lot with spreading it. Also leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks for watching and take care of yourself. St. Clair Shores, Michigan is the dream city for every American family, but beneath the beautiful mask lies cruelty. A seemingly ordinary family dispute made the whole town follow the news. Body parts, including a head and a torso, were found in garbage bags. This baffled investigators and terrified all residents. What had happened? Who was this man and who dismembered him? These questions shocked even the most experienced investigators. On July 31, 2013, as darkness fell, life on the streets of St. Clair Shores came to a standstill. Unlike in neighboring Detroit, but sometimes trouble did not spare even this quiet town. That night, the home of 59-year-old Donna Scrivo was engulfed in flames. The woman was in a panic, worried about her son who was still inside the house. Ramsey, who was 29 at the time, lived in the basement and could have been trapped as the flames consumed everything in their path. Investigators noticed something strange. Donna ran out of the house but did not even try to get her son Ramsey out, even though she knew he was sleeping downstairs. The police asked her the logical question. Had she deliberately tried to leave her son in the house where he could have perished in the fire? Years earlier, Donna Scrivo had been the perfect mother at first glance. She was always very loving and kissed her children when they came home from school, together with her husband Dan. They were happy parents of 2 sons, Jason and Ramsey. Donna always supported her boys. She was always there for them. She loved them very much and had high hopes for them. Therefore, she paid strict attention to her son's academic performance. She wanted her sons to succeed in school. Donna sent Jason and Ramsey to a private Catholic school, after which they were expected to go to college. For the woman, it was important how she and her family appeared in the eyes of neighbors and acquaintances. Donna always made an effort to look good. She wanted to appear refined. Donna grew up in Sego Valley, Texas. She was always the best at everything, the best cheerleader in high school, the perfect mother, a model girl, a typical Southern beauty. In the late 80s, Donna and her husband Dan Scrivo moved to his home state of Michigan, and for 20 years, the couple led a seemingly perfect life. She was a nurse, he was a painter. They moved into a beautiful house, and their marriage seemed like a dream that many envied. Donna wished the same perfect life for her sons. After graduation, Jason moved far away from home and took a simple job as a laborer. Ramsey remained the sole target for the fulfillment of Donna's dreams. He enrolled at Wayne State University, earned a degree in accounting, and began working for various accounting firms. At the age of 29, Ramsey Scrivo's life could certainly be described as a success story. But a few months before his 30th birthday, he ended up in intensive care. After a party with friends, Ramsey fell and hit his head on the concrete. This caused the man a head injury, after which he changed significantly. Ramsey could no longer concentrate on an activity, became very nervous, and could very easily lose his temper. Every day he struggled with depression and anxiety. Soon, disagreements with his employer became a problem, and Ramsey began to lose projects. This annoyed Dan. In the fall of 2012, Ramsey gave up his successful career and became a partner in his father's company. His mother was disappointed with this development, but Ramsey himself was happier than ever. He loved working with his father. His father was a pillar and a role model for him. Dan protected his son from his mother's excessive expectations. After some time, Ramsey again defied his mother and decided to live separately from his parents. With his disability pension from Social Security and the money his father paid, he could afford his own apartment. Ramsey was an independent, normal man. In the spring of 2013, life presented the Scrivo family with another challenge. Mr. Scrivo had always had health problems, but in the last 2 years, his condition began to deteriorate dramatically. Dan Scrivo had suffered from chronic liver failure his entire life. During an emergency hospital visit, it became clear that the disease had reached its final stage. The hospital stated that nothing more could be done for him, and Dan was able to go home the same day. It was devastating. His family had to watch him slowly die. Donna, a nurse, cared for his condition. She had received several vials of morphine at the hospital to at least slightly alleviate her husband's suffering in his final days. Dan's condition deteriorated faster than anyone could have anticipated. He died less than 24 hours after returning from his 12-day hospital stay. The loss of their father hit the Scrivo sons hard, especially Ramsey. And the situation was further worsened by the arrival of the Maham County medical examiner. The death had not officially occurred in the hospital, so the medical examiner had to verify the circumstances of his death. Since the hospital had recorded how many doses of morphine Dan had been prescribed, the medical examiner, upon review, found that one vial was missing. The missing vial contained a lethal dose of morphine, so it was crucial to find it. when the medical examiner asked Donna where the vial might have gone. The woman took her aside and explained that the vial might have been stolen by her son because he had a mental disorder. The brain injury, his father's death, and the disappeared morphine overlapped, and Ramsey became a suspect. Dan was Ramsey's best friend, and when Donna saw how much he grieved over his father's death, she suspected he would try to take his own life. In her opinion, Ramsey might have taken morphine to follow his father. This made the man furious. He claimed he was of sound mind and had not stolen the morphine. Thereupon, Ramsey made a shocking conjecture. He claimed his mother had deliberately killed his father. Ramsey could not calm down and continued to shout, "She killed him, she killed him." Donna attributed this to his mental state and said, "See, this happens to him all the time." And the family agreed with Donna that Ramsey needed help. Thereupon, the man was admitted to a local clinic for an emergency psychiatric evaluation. However, he did not stay there long, and the accusations were just the beginning of a war between mother and son. There was much that Donna had not made public. The turning point was the news of the most brutal crime in Michigan's history. Just hours after his father's death, Ramsey was admitted to a psychiatric institution on suspicion of attempting to leave the world of his own free will. His mother, Donna, accused Ramsey of stealing morphine, allegedly to die. But a toxicologist found no morphine in Ramsey's body. No traces of morphine were found in his blood, which, however, does not mean that he did not steal the vials. At the same time, no one paid attention to Ramsey's words that his mother had killed his father. The medical record stated, "Typical aggressive episode with a history of mental illness." So the investigators did not pursue the matter. As a result, Donna had a quiet funeral. She organized everything, and Dan's body was cremated. Donna tried to take control of her fractured family and her disturbed son. In court, she pleaded that her son had a head injury and a mental disorder, that he was depressed due to his father's recent death, and that he was unable to care for himself. The woman was very convincing and seemed to be acting in her son's best interest. Donna insisted that she was a nurse and capable of adequately caring for her son, and the court agreed. Ramsey returned to his parents' home in St. Clair Shores. Donna was embarrassed by what her son was telling people. She did not really want to talk about it and only said that Ramsey had lost his mind and was not feeling well. At 32, Ramsey was living under his mother's wing again. He was angry at Donna's behavior and found the idea of living under the care of his mother or anyone else absolutely ridiculous. As it later turned out, Ramsey was not mentally unstable, as Donna had told everyone about him. He absolutely did not need around-the-clock care and was quite independent. After burying her husband and regaining control over her son, Donna was ready to move on with her life. But in reality, she had started the journey to a new life long before. September 2012, 8 months before her husband's death, Donna was traveling alone. Shortly before Dan's death, the woman was invited to her 40th high school reunion in Texas. She was very much looking forward to it and naturally wanted to make a good impression. Despite her husband's illness, she diligently prepared. She lost weight, began to pay attention to her appearance, and even got permanent makeup. Whether intentionally or not, she began to communicate with her high school sweetheart. She actively spoke with him and tried to rekindle the spark that reminded her of the best days of her life. After the event, Donna returned to Michigan, but her heart remained in Texas. After returning from the reunion, Donna began to constantly talk to this man. They chatted so often that the woman eventually even thought she could get back together with him after her husband's death. Donna decided that it was time to return to her home state of Texas. June 2013, however, there was a serious obstacle. If Donna wanted to return to Texas, she had to take Ramsey with her, so she began to process her son. She explained that nothing held her in Michigan anymore, that they could sell the house and move to Texas, where a new life awaited them. But Ramsey strictly refused to leave. He did not want to move to Texas, he wanted to stay home. And why shouldn't she have said at that moment, "Okay, if you don't want me to take care of you, fine, then you can live alone and I'll go to Texas." But for Donna, people's opinions were too important. What will people think of me if I leave and give up custody of my son? On July 31, 2013, 2 months later, the Scrivo family home was in flames. Ramsey was trapped, but then miraculously, Ramsey remained unharmed, but the case was not clean. When Ramsey came out of the house, he looked confused, saying he didn't feel well, had trouble moving, and had trouble waking up. The police asked him what he had taken. He said he had taken sedatives. Paramedics suspected he had taken more than the prescribed dose. But Ramsey said his mother had given him the right pills and he had simply taken them without asking. After the fire was extinguished, firefighters investigated the cause of the fire. The fire had started in the basement, where a pile of rags lay next to the boiler. Donna said it was Ramsey's fault because he constantly smoked there, to which the firefighters replied that they had found no evidence that the fire was caused by a cigarette. The cause of the fire seemed suspicious to the investigators, but they found no evidence of Donna's involvement. Since there was no evidence of arson or injuries, the incident was classified as an accident. Since Ramsey was in Donna's care, the two were to continue living together, but it was impossible to live in the burned-out house, so Ramsey's apartment was the only option, and the conversation about Texas continued. Donna began to persuade her son again. It was clear to her that her Texas romance with her high school sweetheart would end if she did not persuade her son to leave the house. But Ramsey remained stubborn. Donna wanted to get him. They argued constantly. At home, on the street, shouting could be heard everywhere. Ramsey even went to the neighbors to ask for help so they would help him escape from his mother. He went to them every day, sometimes twice a day. According to the neighbors, the man seemed very depressed and told them how hard it was for him to live with his mother. After failing to persuade Ramsey, Donna turned to her second son, Jason, who was living in another state at the time. Jason said, "You don't have to live with Ramsey." But his mother replied that she had to take care of him. Even after that, Jason said he had a premonition of something bad. Monday, January 27, 2014, Sinclair Shores. It got as cold as -1 degrees. Donna Scrivo, my son Ramsey Scrivo, left for a walk yesterday at 8:30 a.m. and still hasn't returned. The cold weather was one of many reasons Donna worried that something bad had happened to her son. She told the police that he left the house on Sunday and took his phone with him. She saw Ramsey walking towards the grocery store, which is north of their house, but he did not return home. But neither the store employees nor the regular customers saw Ramsey that day. The case was handed over to Margaret, who had been with the police for 25 years. Donna said she had called Ramsey, but he didn't answer. She described what he left the house wearing: a parka, pajama pants, sneakers, and a t-shirt. It was strange to hear that Ramsey could have left the house like that because it was a cold winter in Sinclair Shores that year. The temperature was -1 degrees during the day and significantly lower at night. If he spent the night outside without warm clothes, he would freeze. Margaret asked about intentions to leave the world, and Donna confirmed them. The police took the case seriously. This disappearance was atypical. Officers tried to locate his phone and determine his location. Then they requested a printout of Ramsey's phone's call log, although they knew they would not receive it for days. In the meantime, Donna spread the news of Ramsey's disappearance. The woman asked the neighbors if they had seen him, but everyone denied it. To reassure her, the neighbors assumed Ramsey had met up with friends. It was the weekend, and he usually went out late. They assured the woman that he would eventually either call or come home. The Scrivo family friend did not pay much attention to Ramsey's disappearance. He knew that the man was tired of his mother and assumed that they had argued and he would spend the night at a friend's house. But at the end of the day, Ramsey had not reappeared. Talking to her colleague that evening, Margaret said that the case would probably end badly. She suspected that Ramsey might be dead. Another cold night passed, then another. 3 days after Ramsey's disappearance, the police received printouts of his phone calls, and what they saw deeply baffled them. The incoming calls were from all members of the Scrivo family except Donna. Although Donna herself said she had called Ramsey often, there were no calls from her. Then Margaret called her and left a message. She asked Donna to call her back as they urgently needed to discuss Ramsey's calls. Normally, the woman would call back immediately, but not this time. On January 30, 2014, there was still no news from Ramsey or Donna. Investigators were confused because normally parents whose children are missing are willing to actively assist the police in the search. On Thursday, then, the eerie happened. A gruesome discovery in Sinclair County, a dismembered body. Sinclair County is 70 km from investigator Margaret's jurisdiction. The police were informed about body parts, including a head and torso, found in garbage bags. 8 bags containing 12 body parts were found, but it was not clear whether they belonged to one person or several. Of course, this news shocked everyone. Everyone in Sinclair or Macomb County was horrified by the discovery. The police thought it was a gang problem, a botched deal where they wanted to get rid of someone they didn't want. Since there were no leads, the case went public. The sheriff classified the case as murder. Police were still looking for clues, and no arrests had been made yet. Amidst the news of the mysterious murder, Margaret Ade continued her search for Ramsey, but the missing person case soon took an unexpected turn as Ramsey's mother was also missing. For several days she had had no contact with him. Finally, after 2 days of silence, Donna surfaced with a wild guess. She called Margaret at 10 a.m. and asked if she had heard about the body found in Sinclair. Without waiting for an answer, Donna began to talk about the dismembered body and said she had to drive to Sinclair. Margaret asked why, and the woman replied that she had to identify Ramsey's body. All of this sounded like the ramblings of a madman. Even Margaret didn't believe that the body had anything to do with Ramsey's missing case. But why did Donna think that? Was it because her son had been missing for so long? According to her, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was Ramsey. Sinclair County is almost 70 km from Donna and Ramsey's home. The investigators were unclear how much they should rely on her intuition. There was no reason to believe it was Ramsey's body. The investigation had a similar case. Ramsey Scrivo, Sinclair Shores, and a body in Sinclair County. It was very strange, as if they were trying to create a case. Meanwhile, investigators in Sinclair County actively searched for clues in the dismembered body case. A student at the local high school said he saw the bags being disposed of by a woman. The witness described the woman as light-skinned with long dark hair in a silver Chevrolet SUV. He saw her shaking out the contents of the bag, which the witness bought for €100, holding a dog, and thought, "That's strange. Why would someone dispose of a dead dog by the side of the road?" Another witness then reported seeing the same woman. The delivery driver said he saw this silver car near the gas station shortly before the bags were thrown away. The driver also saw that it was being driven by a woman. After several more reports of the car in the area, police requested surveillance footage from all local gas stations, and then the video made the news. This is surveillance video from the store. It's a perfectly normal security video that clearly shows it's Donna Scrivo. An error is out of the question. A few minutes later, the investigator received another call. The medical examiner confirmed that the victim's fingerprints matched those of Ramsey Scrivo. Everyone was stunned and realized that they now had to look for Donna. "I have unpleasant news. I know you've already seen the videos and news reports about the events in Sinclair County. We have identified the body. It's your son. I'm very sorry," and no emotion. Her reaction did not match the usual reaction of a mother to the news of her child's death. "How did you know? From the fingerprints. Are you sure it's him?" "I'm sorry, but yes, my son. Did he have friends in Sinclair?" "No." "When was the last time you were there?" "A few years ago. I was taking care of a patient there." "Something isn't right. I know you were in Sinclair County yesterday." No, Donna didn't know that the police had video footage of her car. "Perhaps the photos will help you remember." "What photos?" Margaret asked if they really had to show her proof that she was in Sinclair County. Donna said yes. Then Margaret pulled out printouts of the surveillance footage. "Here, look at this. See, that's me." Margaret then asked what she was doing there. "I filled up the car and drove around the area looking for Ramsey. I hope you can remember more details so we can understand what happened." "There's nothing to tell. We know you're not the bad guy. I think you're just very tired of living with a son who has a mental disorder. It's really hard. I couldn't bear it. I didn't kill my son. Maybe he killed himself and you thought that would cover it up. I didn't kill my son. I don't know what you want to hear, just the truth. I think it's time I got a lawyer." We have search warrants for your apartment and your car. What are we going to find there, Donna? You won't find anything. We know there was a lot of blood. The medical examiner said so too, so we're going to look for traces of blood. You can't wipe away that much blood, no matter how thoroughly you clean. If there was blood, we'll find it. The smallest drop, we'll see it. I don't know what to say. While Donna refused to talk, investigators searched Ramsey's apartment. Her house had been destroyed by a fire, and she and her son were living in his apartment. Already at the apartment door, a strong smell of bleach hit them, which intensified as they went upstairs. Traces of blood and bleach led from the bathroom to Ramsey's bedroom. It was obvious that Donna had tried to clean the blood with bleach. A few hours later, the autopsy report revealed how Ramsey was killed. The cause of death was strangulation with a rope, so Donna strangled her son. But the problem was Ramsey was much bigger than Donna. She was 1.70 m tall and weighed 70 kg. And Ramsey was a big man, about 1.80 m tall and 120 kg. Given her size, it would have been easy for Ramsey to throw her over his shoulder if she had simply come from behind and started to strangle him. However, Ramsey's body showed no injuries. No one had knocked him down to strangle him later. The investigators realized that it was unlikely that Donna could have killed Ramsey. So who did it? February 8, 2014. You have a free call from Donna Scrivo, an inmate at Macomb County Jail. Donna, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. You know I didn't kill my son. I don't know what happened, but I don't think it was you. A man broke into our house. You know I didn't kill my son. I don't know what happened, but I don't think it was you. In February 2014, 60-year-old Donna Scrivo was in a cell, accused of dismembering her son Ramsey's body. During a phone call with her sister, Donna made a shocking statement about the circumstances of Ramsey's death. I was standing there. Belle came up the stairs and saw Ramsey in his room. He was lying there dead, and there was also a man dressed all in black. All of them wore masks. He killed Ramsey. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "If you don't do what I say, I'll kill Jason too." He had a weapon. In the next few days, he told me what to do. Donna said he was there for her when she went to the police to report Ramsey missing. He forced her to go to the store and told her which saw to buy, and allegedly didn't let her out of his sight for a minute. Donna then claimed he was the one who cut her son into pieces. He beat me up and then forced me to help him dispose of Ramsey's body. And finally, he drove Donna to Sinclair County to dispose of the remains of the body. After that, he left, but he threatened her that he would come back and kill her whole family if she told the police everything. I don't know where he is now. I didn't say anything at first because I wanted to make sure Jason was safe. I told the lawyer and he didn't release the information to the press. This is a twist in a terrible story, but do the facts support it? Among the evidence found in St. Clair County was a saw box. Investigators were able to determine where it was purchased based on the item. In addition, there were surveillance cameras in the store which the police used to track Donna down. The footage showed that the woman came into the store alone and bought exactly the saw with which she dismembered her son's body. Ramsey's neighbor also doubted Donna's version of events. She called the police and reported that one morning. After Ramsey disappeared, she saw Donna struggling to carry 3 garbage bags. The investigators asked the neighbor if she had seen anyone in the car, perhaps someone hiding there. The woman replied that no one was there. Donna also drove into the parking lot near the police station but was alone in the car. The witnesses saw no one but her, and she is alone everywhere in the video. The masked man theory burst like a soap bubble. It was all Donna's master plan. She did it all by herself. According to the police, Donna wanted to start a new life after finding her high school sweetheart again. And when her husband was diagnosed with a fatal illness, Donna couldn't wait any longer and accelerated the inevitable. Family members were now convinced that she had injected her husband with a lethal dose of morphine to get rid of him, and then blamed the vial on Ramsey before forcing her son to admit the lie of his accusations. And the investigators, who had spoken with Donna's husband from Texas, recognized the motive. Margaret contacted him and explained who she was. By this time, Donna was already in prison. The man was visibly shaken by the news. He knew nothing. The investigator asked if Donna had told him that Ramsey was missing, and he replied, "No, Donna didn't even mention it. She didn't tell me anything." The only topic that interested both of them was Donna's return to Texas. He said that Donna would come to Texas after she had solved the problem with her son. The investigators suspected that Donna began to make plans at that moment. Ramsey was like a thorn in her side that she had to get rid of. Margaret was sure that the fire in the woman's house was the first attempt to kill her son. Donna probably didn't expect him to wake up and free himself. On the night of January 25, Donna, having learned from her experiences, took matters into her own hands. She gave Ramsey a dose of sedatives, just enough so that he no longer resisted, and she simply strangled him. The next morning, she began to cover her tracks. Without cutting him up, she had to get rid of the body. Dismemberment was the only way. On June 30, 2015, the jury delivered a verdict. Donna was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. She will spend the rest of her life in prison. Donna Scrivo is a mentally unstable, violent woman. No one would ever have imagined that she could be capable of such a thing. The mother who did that is a devil. No human being can ever imagine how a mother can kill her child. Ramsey's death was senseless. He didn't deserve it. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like. That helps a lot with spreading it. Also, leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks for watching and take care. It is believed that a crowded place is safer and the risk of being assaulted is significantly lower. Statistically, this is true, but nothing stops a criminal from luring his victim to a deserted place to do something terrible there. Today's story took place in Andria, Italy. It is a protected historical city with about 100,000 inhabitants. It is quite well known among tourists and attracts a large stream of visitors daily. For many locals, this enabled the establishment of a tourism-oriented transport business, whose income mostly comes from guests from other cities and countries. The tourist attraction in the city was the Castle Castelmonte, near which the Mansi family lived. The mother and father had an 8-year-old daughter named Graziella Mansi. She was their only child and a welcome addition to the family. They were the kind of tourism-oriented business people. The Mann family had owned their own market stall for about 10 years, where they sold nuts and dried fruits right on the street. They had a very advantageous location on the way to the castle's main gate. The business provided a good income. Although she was only 8 years old, Graziella often worked here helping her parents. She was oriented towards the family business from childhood, which made her very happy. The elders worked at one of the main thoroughfares. There was a constant stream of customers, which they couldn't always handle. The child's help was very useful, and the girl liked feeling part of the shared endeavor. She was friendly and active and was remembered by many who came to shop. August 19, 2000 was an ordinary Saturday with maximum tourist traffic. Weekend work was a familiar routine for the Mansi family. At such times, Graziella's grandfather was often behind the counter. The girl gladly accompanied him and ran errands. Normally, people streamed towards the castle, so the grandfather couldn't leave the stall. Around 10 o'clock, he once again asked his granddaughter for help. The older gentleman was tired in the evening and wanted to send his granddaughter to the fountain to fill a small bottle with water. Graziella gladly agreed. She set off towards the fountain. The journey there took 5 minutes, but Graziella was delayed, and her grandfather immediately became worried. He didn't want to leave the stall unattended and comfort himself with the thought that his granddaughter might have met someone she knew. So she was held up and delayed on her way back. But when more than 20 minutes had passed and the child still hadn't appeared, the man realized something was wrong. He decided to go to the fountain on his own to see what might have delayed the responsible Graziella. To his surprise, Mr. Mansi could not find the girl either on the path or near the fountain. The man searched all the surrounding streets, even going through them, but still couldn't find the child. It all seemed very suspicious to him. The grandfather went back to the stall hoping that Graziella had already returned there by a different route, but the girl wasn't there. About half an hour after the disappearance, he contacted the girl's son and mother and began calling friends and acquaintances whose numbers he knew. The parents did the same, but it turned out that no one had seen the schoolgirl. Finally, the whole family and some of Graziella's friends gathered in the square near Mancy's stall. Less than an hour later, adults and teenagers split into groups and set out to search for the child. The commotion was noticed by passers-by and even some tourists. Several people volunteered to join the search. The relatives prepared and took a photo of Graziella from the house to show people. Some reported seeing a girl that afternoon and evening who looked similar to the description. However, no one had any idea where she had gone or what had happened to her. It was a quiet, peaceful area where nothing usually happened. It was hard to imagine that someone could have assaulted the girl in such a busy place. After several hours of unsuccessful searching, the Mancy family went to the local police station. The family reported the child missing. The police officers were engaged by the case, and so the Carabinieri joined the search for the missing girl. A few hours after the disappearance, a police officer walking through the streets with one of the troops was approached by an eyewitness. According to him, he heard a disturbing child scream coming from a wooded area near Castel de Monte. Two police officers went to the edge of this area and saw clouds of smoke rising from its center. They didn't believe this could have anything to do with the girl's disappearance, but decided to see what was going on. They should have found out what kind of fire it was and called the fire department. However, as the officers approached and the fire was only about a dozen meters away, they smelled a strange odor of burning flesh. The fire itself was not like an ordinary campfire. As they got closer, the Carabinieri determined that dry leaves had been thrown into the fire, under which was something resembling a human body. The most frightening thing was that the corpse was the size of a child and the clothing exactly matched that of the missing schoolgirl. The police were almost certain that the corpse before them was that of the missing Graziella. The flames were consuming the girl's entire body. She was already burned when found, and she was dead. The forest was immediately searched. Some of the girl's clothing and a lighter, probably used to ignite the fire, were found, but nothing else pointing to the perpetrators. A more detailed examination was required. Furthermore, the authorities hoped for video recordings, of which there were several in the area around the castle. The medical examiner confirmed the investigators' suspicion that the deceased was Graziella, based on the autopsy results. The specialist was not yet able to fully answer the questions of the investigators and the girl's relatives. The body was in poor condition. Nevertheless, it was concluded that the child had been intentionally killed and set on fire. The news of this heinous case immediately spread through the media. As early as the next day, journalists began practically attacking the man's family. When the girl's relatives were informed about the incident, they initially didn't believe it was Graziella. This spontaneous act of cruelty seemed so abominable that the entire neighborhood was horrified. The media diligently spread rumors about the brutal murder that had occurred near the famous castle. The public was frightened by the incident. The influx of tourists significantly decreased due to this news. Visitors considered the area unsafe and were hesitant to visit the attraction, which significantly impacted the tourism industry in Andria. The investigators did not waste any time. From the beginning, the police officers set to work with great zeal. The main theory was an attack by a rapist who had lured the child away from the tourist route, where almost no one was, raped her, and then burned her to destroy all traces of his crime. Naturally, an 8-year-old child couldn't have made such dangerous enemies in her life, so it had to be a much older person. The authorities considered several possibilities. First, they looked at the list of registered sex offenders who might have been in the region at that time. However, this theory found less and less support as the investigation progressed. Even tourist flows were analyzed. It was not ruled out that the attacker was traveling and looking for random victims, one of whom was the innocent Graziella. Gradually, this possibility also seemed increasingly unlikely. The more the police spoke with witnesses, friends, and acquaintances of the man's family, the more the name Pasquale Tortora emerged. He was a young man in his early 20s known throughout the neighborhood. He worked illegally as a handyman on the same street where the Mancy family's business was located. Many people noticed that as soon as Graziella came to help her family, Pasquale kept looking at her strangely. His gaze seemed disturbing. This fact was noticed by several people, which looked very suspicious. When the authorities spoke with Pasquale's friends, these fears were confirmed. Some of his buddies even claimed jokingly that the 20-year-old was seriously in love with an 8-year-old girl. But against the backdrop of events, the teenagers' jokes seemed much darker than they thought. Could Pasquale really be a predator who killed the girl he was obsessed with? His relatives denied such a possibility. He was raised in a decent family and had never been in trouble with the law, at least not until that fateful evening at Castel di Monte. Despite his family's assertions, Pasquale became the prime suspect. When the investigators met with him, the suspicions intensified further. He was wearing a dirty t-shirt with suspicious dark red stains and obvious traces of dirt, as if he had been digging in the earth. His face was scratched, suggesting a struggle. The scratches were superficial, and the investigators suspected they came from small children's hands. Pasquale himself, of course, denied being involved in the attack on the girl, but the more the investigators spoke with the young man, the more his story changed and became more serious. After just a few hours in the police office, Pasquale began to break down. Any doubts the investigators had vanished when the young man uttered a disturbing sentence. He said that he found Graziella very beautiful, even though she was an 8-year-old child. Furthermore, there were enough contradictions in the alleged murderer's accounts to suggest that the boy wanted to hide too much from the police. In one version, Pasquale said that he came to the forest where the burning corpse was found while he was taking a walk and noticed the child without any signs of life. When he saw the corpse in flames, he got scared and ran away, after which the police appeared. Later, he added to the story that he noticed Graziella when she was going to the fountain to get water. He spoke to the girl, who was not afraid of him since she had seen him many times. Up to that point, he had always behaved calmly and appropriately. Pasquale said that a female dog in the local forest had recently given birth to puppies and offered to show them to her. When the perpetrator finally came clean, he said he had lured the child into the forest and then set the corpse on fire because he wanted to erase the traces of the crime. The young man emphasized that he did not intend to rape the girl and that it was actually a sadistic game that simply got out of control. All these facts were eagerly spread by the media, which generously seasoned every news item with rumors and frightening details. All this caused confusion, but in fact, the true motive of the murderer was still unclear. After all these many contradictory statements, Pasquale's story was still not finished. The police wanted to hear the true version. There were numerous gaps in his words, obvious lies that did not match the evidence. He provided the Carabinieri with a chronology of events and other valuable information, but continued to evade many questions about the course of the attack itself and the motive for the crime. It was clear that the fire had broken out around 8 o'clock, but the child had disappeared almost 3 hours earlier. What had happened during that time? The motive for the arson was voices. Pasquale heard people walking near the forest. He was sure something was going on with the search for Graziella. The most cruel part of the whole thing was the medical examiner's report, which suggested that the girl was conscious and still alive at the time of the arson. The Carabinieri continued to pressure the suspect. It seemed strange that, given the scale of the atrocity, he had gotten away with only a few small scratches on his face. How could he handle the girl so easily? Doubts arose as to whether he had acted alone. Probably someone had helped him. It was decided to repeat the interrogation. Finally, Pasquale was willing to cooperate with the investigation and tell the whole truth, which he had been afraid of before. He said he had not lured the girl into the forest alone to rape or abuse her, but had been encouraged by a group of men aged 18 to 20. At that time, Giuseppe De Bari, Vincenzo Cardillo, Domenico Margiotta, and Michele Zagaria were waiting for them in the forest. Pasquale claimed that no rape was planned or had taken place. He had had an argument with these young men which he lost. Allegedly, he was forced to pay. The buddies demanded that he lure the girl into the forest. There, all four attacked Graziella and abused her for several hours, not allowing her to leave the forest. They forced her to be silent, but when they heard the adults searching for the girl, they became scared. The whole crew was afraid of coming into conflict with the law, and so they decided to burn the girl. But they had no combustibles with them. The youths didn't feel like looking for gasoline, so they beat the girl until she lost consciousness. Then they tried to set her clothes on fire, but it wasn't enough. At that moment, Graziella regained consciousness and screamed, upon which the four young men beat her again until she lost consciousness. They threw leaves on the corpse and tried again to set it on fire with a lighter. Now the fire was ignited. All participants in this madness were between 18 and 20 years old. It is known that the young men were raised in decent families, not on the fringes of society, so their deeds seemed monstrous and incomprehensible. Everyone who knew this crew well described them as quiet and well-adjusted young people in whom they had never noticed cruelty or a taste for crime. The only one among them who had problems with the law had previously committed a petty theft. Therefore, the decision to burn the girl alive seemed unthinkable. After Pasquale told them about his friends, the police were able to easily arrest all the young men. This news shocked all of Italy. It spread through the media. When the suspects were arrested, they from the very beginning denied any involvement in Graziella's death and emphasized that they didn't know why the authorities were even interested in them. However, the investigators were determined to question them until they could finally find out what had happened that fateful evening in the forest. Unlike Pasquale, these young men had clean clothes and no scratches on their faces or bodies. During searches of their homes, nothing suspicious could be found. They continued to assert that while Pasquale Tadora harbored strange feelings for the girl, they themselves had nothing to do with the incident. Despite hours of interrogation, none of the suspects confessed to being involved in the crime. Therefore, they were simply released at this stage of the investigation. However, the young men remained in the sights of the authorities as potential suspects. It was also strange that the four young men were seen at the funeral, which took place before Pasquale's confession, carrying Graziella's coffin. They were seen crying as if they were truly mourning. When arrested, they stated that they were painfully aware of what had happened because they knew the girl, even though they had no contact with her. They had often seen Graziella at the Mansi family's business and thought she was very nice. The police officers suspected that their appearance at the funeral was not accidental. Although they didn't know the deceased's family well, the young men might have felt guilty and tried to atone for it in this way. Or they simply wanted to know the status of the investigation and whether they were encouraged to participate in the massacre. However, that day the ceremony attracted people from all over the city and even a few concerned tourists. So the four crying boys got lost in the crowd and didn't stand out. When they were all brought back for questioning, the suspects were addressed individually. Vincenzo and Giuseppe insisted they had an alibi. According to the young men's account, both were in a game club in the city around 7 p.m. on the day of the girl's disappearance. Michel and Domenico immediately refused to cooperate with the investigation. They didn't want to answer questions and demanded lawyers. This, of course, only increased the police's suspicion. At that point, the investigators could only check Vincenzo and Giuseppe's alibi and went to the club. The buddies were there, but they left the club after about an hour and couldn't provide a reliable alibi for another period of time. Consequently, they could have participated in the torture of the victim. Unexpectedly, Michel and Domenico confessed to the crime. They largely confirmed Pasquale Tadora's story. According to them, their friends had invited them to the forest in the evening to, as they put it, play with fire. When they arrived, it turned out that the rest of the company was already gathered. Pasquale had to bait the girl. Naturally, he chose Graziella, who, as many friends said, evoked strange feelings in him and could be an easy prey. The others simply hid behind the trees and waited for the victim to come with her tormentor. Pasquale confirmed again that he caught the girl near the fountain as she was drawing water and offered to show her the puppies born in the nearby forest. The 8-year-old naive girl had no idea that it could all end in beating and burning, so she was interested and agreed. He managed to deceive and seduce the child. Because Graziella loved animals very much and was delighted at the opportunity to see the little puppies. All the more, she trusted the familiar young man and did not expect such betrayal. The wooded area was located near the place where the criminal had caught his victim. It took them about 15 to 20 minutes to get there. By that time, the grandfather should have already been actively searching for his granddaughter. When they arrived at the specified spot, the other criminals jumped out of their hiding places. Graziella was horrified. Probably at that moment the girl realized she had fallen into a trap, but it was too late. The child had nothing to oppose her tormentors. The young men were slightly drunk and continued drinking. For some reason, they were very amused by the fact that the girl was so frightened. According to the suspects, they did not intend to rape her but only wanted to play with the defenseless girl and make fun of her. Graziella was so frightened that she was actually in shock. At some point, one of them overestimated their strength. She fell and hit her head on a stone, after which she lost consciousness. According to the youths, burning Graziella was not initially planned. They wanted to tie her up to scare her even more. But when she fell and lost consciousness, it brought everyone back to reality. They thought the girl was dead and panicked. At the same moment, they heard voices and were afraid that they were searching for the girl. Probably due to the alcohol intoxication in their inflamed brains, the idea came to them that it was necessary to destroy all traces of the crime, and for this purpose, fire would be perfect. The suspect's statements were partially confirmed. In particular, the forensic examination revealed no clear evidence of rape. The victim was wearing underwear, although there were injuries to the genitals, which may not have been due to rape but to attempted violence. On the other hand, the condition of the remains was extremely poor. It could not be ruled out that the child had not only been tortured but also raped. However, it was impossible to confirm this because the body was severely burned. The Carabinieri suspected that part of the evidence might have been destroyed by fire. As the boys' companions had hoped, the story itself seemed far-fetched. The authorities looked for ways to confirm, given the injuries on the victim's body, that it was a heinous child rape. The prisoners, meanwhile, continued to insist that it was an accident. It was decided to finally let the court decide the fate of the juvenile offenders. 2 members of the company never confessed to the crime. Vincenzo and Giuseppe confessed that they had only come to the forest because Pasquale had called them. They had no idea what the game with fire meant and were shocked by what had happened. According to their own account, they quickly left the forest because they didn't want to be there. But these young men also had no idea how this dangerous game could end. They were simply afraid to report to the police because they feared either retaliation from the others or trouble with the law, which would inevitably come if they were accused of complicity. Despite all the contradictions in the story, Pasquale Tortora received the mildest sentence at the end of the trial. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. There were 2 main reasons for this. The first was the confession. Among the perpetrators, he was the first to willingly cooperate with the investigation. Second, no matter how many tests the investigators conducted, everything always indicated that it was not Pasquale who lit the fire on the child's corpse. Although he actively participated in the abuse of the victim, the investigators were sure that the corpse was disposed of by the other 4. The other perpetrators were found guilty of kidnapping, child abuse, and intentional murder and were sentenced to the highest possible penalty. They all received life sentences in solitary confinement. It was clear that they would spend the rest of their lives behind bars without contact with other prisoners. Graziella's mother fainted when the verdict was announced. Her husband supported her. The families of the accused argued openly, and the victims' relatives believed that the perpetrators got what they deserved, with the exception of Pasquale, who received too light a sentence for luring their child into the forest and sentencing her to death. Vincenzo and Giuseppe were most outraged by the harsh verdict. They continued to insist on their innocence so vehemently that they even managed to find supporters who believed their story. But it didn't help them, and they could not appeal the verdict. 8 years have passed since these events. Vincenzo Carrel decided at the age of 27 to voluntarily take his own life out of hopelessness or guilt for his actions. During this time, he was in prison and managed to smuggle a rope from his bathrobe into his cell, with which he took his own life. A few days earlier, his mother had come to the prison to visit him. The woman continued to believe in his innocence and fully supported her son. But Vincenzo himself had at that moment almost completely lost the will to live. Although he was still alive, the woman felt that Vincenzo was no longer with her, and her maternal feelings were not deceived. On June 19, 2013, Michel's lawyer applied for a retrial due to some judicial errors. He was dissatisfied with the result, but the court rejected the application. Pasquale's mother publicly addressed the Mansi family and apologized for what her son had done. She believed that he should pay for his actions to the full extent of the law. Graziella's mother did not accept this apology and reacted rather harshly, stating that Pasquale should at least live through everything that happened to her daughter. If he hadn't lured her into the forest, the girl would still be alive. Therefore, Graziella's parents blamed Pasquale for everything. The name of Graziella Mans is still on everyone's lips in Italy. Near Castel de Monte, there is a small gravestone with her name and photo, as well as a summary of the life story of this little girl, which ended so tragically. Here, locals and tourists often lay flowers and toys. More often, of course, this place is visited by the girl's relatives. 24 years after the tragedy, Pasquale Tortora was released from prison. His sentence was reduced by 6 years for good behavior. He is now years old and has decided to start his life anew. Whether he will succeed is hard to say. He was the only one from the entire company who was convicted in an abbreviated procedure that allowed for a milder sentence. Immediately after the incident, the two stopped being friends, and their relationship was not restored even until Pasquale's release. Pasquale claims that not a day goes by that he doesn't think about what happened and the suffering he caused Graziella and her family. If Pasquale could return to that day, he would not have committed the crime. His family helped him get through this difficult time and come to his senses. He thanks everyone who gave him a chance for a new life. The mother of little Graziella commented on Pasquale's early release. The woman claims that with his release, the sense of justice has disappeared. She believes that such people do not change and pose a danger to society, especially since they do not deserve a second chance. Vincenzo and Giuseppe, who proclaim their innocence, do not understand why Pasquale did this to them. When Vincenzo voluntarily said goodbye to life, he wrote a suicide note in which he also insisted on his innocence and expressed anger at the injustice that had befallen them. He entrusted the confirmation of this fact to a caring person in the future and refused to continue the meaningless struggle for his freedom. Guy Domenico and Mica are still in isolation. Giuseppe continues to insist on his innocence. He spends his time reading the Bible, accepts his sentence, and does not try to challenge the court's decision. At the same time, he firmly believes that he will be released from prison as soon as his complete non-involvement in the murder of the girl is proven. His lawyer, his family, and he himself devoutly believe in the innocence of Giuseppe and the deceased Vincenzo. All three continue to claim that Pasquale is the main person responsible for the tragedy. It was he who not only lured the girl into the forest, but also brutally tortured, raped, and burned her. Their statements are confirmed by the fact that only on Pasquale's body were traces of a struggle found. The girl's scratches, as well as dirt and her blood on his clothing. All the others were unscratched and clean. Nevertheless, Pasquale received the least possible sentence and is already free. If you liked the video, please give it a like. That helps a lot with distribution. Also, leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video further. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Thanks for watching and take care.